My presentation is called The Renaissance Rep, which is a paper by Mark Leslie. He wrote for the HBR probably about 10 years ago now. And I remember reading it back when I started at Mixpanel. Again, it was about 8 people, so it was me and a bunch of engineers in 4th floor walk-up with a co-ed bathroom. And basically, I had to go out and start selling this product to really large organizations who could boss us around, which was pretty daunting. And I'm guessing some of you in the room might be in a similar position. And the paper really struck a chord with me. The concept essentially is the first salesperson in any startup is not just doing sales, they're also helping dictate product roadmap, they're working with the company on sales operations, they're putting together a sales process, they're coming up with pricing, they're negotiating legal, they're implementing CRM, they're setting up a sales stack, they're training the rest of the organization on what the sales pitch looks like. So it takes more than just your traditional coin-operated rep. It takes somebody who's really down for the cause, who's engaged with the rest of the company. And that's what I'm going to talk through a little bit today. So my goal is to give you all a high level of my tips around the full sales cycle, from cold prospecting, giving a really great demo, negotiating effectively, navigating procurement, especially when you don't necessarily have an in-house counsel and you don't have all the security documentation ready to go. And then what to do with the client or the company once you close the deal. So kind of walk through an end-to-end sales cycle. And then I'd really just like to open it up to questions. So hear what you guys are working through, help talk through any deals. Anyone has any big deals in the line right now you're trying to close for the end of June? We can talk them through, come up with ideas. Quick show of hands, how many people in the room are in a sales function right now? Awesome, most of you. And how many are in other functions, whether it's marketing or engineering and just want to learn more about sales? So about 50-50, which is great. So for some of you who are in sales, some of this might be, maybe you've heard this before. Hopefully it's always good to get some refreshers and some tips. For those of you not in sales, hopefully this will be really helpful as you begin to navigate the sales process. All right, so agenda today, I'm going to walk through prospecting, the kind of typical sales process, prospecting, qualification, discovery, demo, different SaaS deal structures and options, how to negotiate, how to navigate procurement, what does it mean to forecast and how do you do it well? What does a great sales stack look like? So which products should you be buying and how do you convince your founder to give you budget for them? And then post-sale, what do you do after you close the client? Cool. So prospecting. I'm guessing a lot of you in the room are probably prospecting right now. You might not have tons of inbound quite yet, and that's okay as you begin to ramp up your marketing functions. So here's some tips around prospecting, and frankly, I highly recommend hiring a BDR to do this, hiring somebody whose sole job it is to prospect. But I understand that early on, as the only account executive at the company, or maybe not even in the sales function, you might have to do all of your own prospecting, which is fine. It is time consuming, and what I have found is the best way to do it is to tailor it to a persona and then hit that person as often as possible. So if you're not familiar with the concept of a persona, different organizations sell to different personas. So you might have an IT persona, you might have a design, an engineering, a product, marketing. Figure out who your core customer is and what your audience is. Figure out an insight to sell them. So maybe that's, hey, CIO, I know that you care a lot about making processes more efficient at your organization. I've worked with companies like X and Y to help them make their processes more efficient. I would love to have 15 minutes of your time to walk you through how my company can help you save lots of money and streamline your processes. So come up with a message that resonates with that persona. And this attention, credibility, relevance ask, this is specifically from a sales methodology called TAS, or target account selling. There are a lot of different methodologies out there. This is one that I happen to like when prospecting. Essentially, you craft a message around those 4 principles. So what I just walked through with example of a CIO. Another one might be, let's say you're going after a CTO, and you found that CTO has written online about, caring a lot about back-end infrastructure and making it scalable. And so you can reach out to him and say, hey, I've noticed you've written a lot about the scalability of your back-end infrastructure. I've helped companies like X and Y, or I've worked with companies like X and Y scale their infrastructure. I'd be happy to talk to you about ways I think we can make this more efficient or cheaper, et cetera, for you. So tailoring your pitch for that person, keeping it concise. And then the next point is hitting them a lot. So it turns out, research shows that most executives respond on the 8th touch point. So when you set up your campaigns, you want to just keep hitting them over and over and over again. And there's a lot of different research around when exactly you should hit them, what the cadence should look like. I'm not going to be too prescriptive on that. My advice here is to use a tool like Outreach or Yesware or Tout App. There's a ton of them. Set up your campaigns, and so you just keep hitting the people over time for weeks and even months until they respond. I also really am a fan of calling, of picking up the phone and calling. I know it's hard. What I recommend doing, what I love doing with my team, and even when I was the only salesperson I did this, was putting chunks of time on my calendar to pick up the phone and call. Now what I do with my team, I set up call blitz time, so every day from 11 to 12, we're all picking up the phone and calling. We use a really cool tool called Outreach, so we're distributed all over the place, but we can see each other's phone calls, and you click a button and you can join and listen in. So I can listen to my team's calls, I can post in Slack, great job, Rob, handling that negotiation, and would encourage each other to pick up the phone. So any structured way you can do that, I encourage you to do so. It can be really daunting, especially when you're a startup and you're in a room full of 12 people, 20 people, everyone can hear you. It can be a little scary, a little daunting to pick up the phone. But you got to do it. And the rest of the company will hear you and they'll learn from you. And maybe your engineer is sitting right next to you, your product person's right next to you. Hey, I couldn't help but overhear you on that call. Do you think if we built X, Y for you, it would help? Or I heard that you pitch us this way. What if we finesse this and pitch it this way? So it's actually really healthy for the rest of your teammates to hear you on the phone. And as you start to scale sales, this is a big mistake I made at Mixpanel. I used to go hide in the closet to make my calls. We had literally a broom closet. We didn't have any conference rooms. And I would go sit in the broom closet and make my calls. And the problem was, when we started to scale the sales team, we grew to 5 to 10 to 50 to 100, the culture on the floor was that you took your calls in conference rooms. That's not a healthy sales culture. You want to hear each other. You want the floor to be loud. You want there to be energy. You want to, as a new sales rep, you want to listen to the guy next to you making calls. That's how you're going to learn. So I really encourage you guys, pick up the phone on the floor, let your coworkers hear you. As you start to scale and hire more salespeople, it'll really set the right tone for the company. And if you've been hiding in the conference room up till now, it's okay. It's never too late to change, but it's easier to do it earlier. Once you're 150 people, it's really hard to change a culture. Finally, my last tip here is voicemails. Voicemails go a really long way. There's tools now that you can go straight to voicemail even if you don't feel like waiting for the ringing. And I find what happens if you leave a voicemail and then you email somebody and you put in the subject line voicemail or re-voicemail, they're much more likely to respond. And it's just the human voice. They hear you. You're human. You're not just a robot emailing them. They'll say, oh yeah, I really should respond to that email. It's amazing how much that works. So just quick, short, to the point voicemails, they go a long way. All right. So you've done your prospecting, you set up a meeting. Yeah?
When you leave voicemails, do you ask them to call you back?
I do. They never do. That's okay. Yeah, I do. And usually what I say is, hi, this is Aliisa from InVision. Just wanted to check in with you, make sure you got my voicemail. Do you have 5 minutes to connect about your design process? You can reach me at, and then my phone number. I'll follow up with an email so you have my phone number. And then I send an email right after. And that's usually what they respond to. I've gotten a call back maybe like a handful of times in my career. People rarely actually call you back. Every now and then they do, but it's rare. Good question. Any other questions on prospecting? All right. So the next thing I want to talk through is qualification. And one question I always get when I jump into qualification is, well, if you just set up the meeting with that person and you beg them to take a call, can you really qualify them? Yes, you can. And I like this quote because basically my whole mantra on sales is you don't get what you don't ask for. You have the power. As a salesperson, you have a lot of power in the process. Don't give that up easily. It's okay. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to qualify. Your time is valuable. So what is qualification? So BANT is a pretty old school term. I find it applies to most companies. Anyone know what this stands for? Budget, authority, need, and timeline. And these are really, really helpful qualification criteria for almost any sale that I've seen. So right out the gate, you spend a lot of time doing a demo. A demo takes, if you're doing it well, a lot of preparation, a lot of research, at least an hour of your time. Not everyone deserves a demo, and that's okay. So a good sales rep will qualify the prospect, even if you worked really hard to get that meeting, before you invest a lot of time into the demo. So do they have budget? Do they have authority? Do they actually need your product? And are they ready to move quickly? Or are they thinking, yeah, I just want to see a demo of it, maybe in a year. You know what, I don't actually have the authority, my boss does. Great, let's include your boss on the call. And one question I love to ask is, have you ever purchased software at your organization? And that's really telling, because somebody is likely to say, no, I haven't. Or yeah, I have. Okay, great. When you had, who signed off on it? What did the process look like? What was the decision making? And figure out everyone who's engaged on that and get them to join the demo. The more people you get on that initial demo, the higher the odds are that will close. And you can pitch it as something that saves them time, right? If you're talking to Joe and Joe says, you know, I don't really have the authority to sign off on $50,000. Great, who does? My boss, Courtney. Let's get Courtney on the demo. It saves you time. That way you don't have to set up another demo with her later. Let's just not waste your time, put you through the whole sales process, run a trial, get 20 people engaged, and then we can't move forward. So you can pitch it as something that helps them. Make them your co-conspirator when you find your advocate, and let them help you navigate the organization. So once you've qualified your prospect, they've checked your boxes on BANT, the next step is to figure out how to craft your demo. I'm really a strong advocate of spending time with your prospect before your demo and making sure your demo lands. And this can be 5 minutes. It's been really effective for me if I get someone to agree to a demo, can I just have 5 minutes of your time before the demo, especially if they start inviting 20 people and you're suddenly walking into a room like this doing a demo. Just ask for 5 minutes and they'll usually give you 15 or 20. And what you're trying to figure out is what are the 1 or 2 pain points that I need to nail in this demo. And you want to speak their language. Mirroring is a really powerful technique when you can use their terminology, their challenges, their boss's name. That usually pans out really effectively in a demo versus just giving a canned spiel about your company. So you want to navigate their pain points. I think the word pain points is used a lot in sales. Find the pain, find the pain. I think that concept's been around for a really long time. I also like to say figure out what's working well for them, figure out what they like, figure out what they want to amplify. It's not just about solving problems. It's about helping them achieve their ambitions. So figure out what are their goals, what are their incentives, what do they care about, who are they influenced by, who are the stakeholders engaged. As much information as you can find out about the person who can make the decision and sign off and what motivates them, the better your demo will be. Cool. Oh, and this is a book I recommend, Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. If you're new to discovery and discovery calls, he has an entire book dedicated to really great discovery questions and how to dig really deep. So if somebody says, nope, everything's great, I don't need any help with anything, he gives you pointers on how to get beyond that and how to really find pain, because everyone's got it. Not everything is working great for everybody, especially in big companies. So he gives a lot of tips on how to get beneath those sort of surface answers. All right, demo. I love this little image. So we've got Mini Mario. He's a potential customer, and we've got his Flower Power, which is your product. And together, they make the Fireball Mario. I don't actually know what that's called, but amazing person who can do rad shit. That's what you're selling. You are selling Fireball Mario. You're not selling the flower. So when you go in and you do a demo, or you pitch your product, you're not selling a tool and a feature. You're selling a vision. You're selling a dream. You're selling what you can make that person become, how you can make that person the hero in the organization. I think that's really important to internalize. I've seen so many bad demos. I've seen so many feature-laden demos. And I am a huge advocate of storytelling instead of feature selling. So this is a really text-heavy slide. My apologies. I'm going to kind of walk through this in a little bit more detail. The demo takes a lot of practice. A demo is not just showing your product and racing through the features. And I can't tell you, I've been in sales now for 12 years, 13 years. I can't tell you how bad my demo used to be when I started out. I mean, I would literally sit down and I was selling this, financial software product, and I would just race through all the features and I'd cram it all into an hour and I'd be out of breath. And then I'd be like, okay, great, do you guys want a trial? And they'd be like, I guess so. I look back and I cringe now at how I used to demo my product. Now I try to spend as little time in the product as I possibly can. So my favorite way to do a demo is to open with what I learned in the discovery call. So I like to use a deck or even just a Word document, anything that just says, here's what I know about you and about your company. Here's what you're struggling with. Here's what you care about. Does that sound right? Anyone have anything to add to that? Everyone agree with that? Great. Now I'm going to tell you the story of my product. Here's the problem we're trying to solve. Here's companies like you who we've helped, and here's the outcome. Now I'm going to jump in my product, just give you a high-level overview, and I try to keep that to 10 minutes. Even if it's a really complex product, nobody, especially executives, wants to see every single feature you have. And if they do, they're probably not actually the person who has the budget to sign off. They're probably an individual contributor or a power user. And you want to make them happy, for sure, but that's not the right audience for your demo. This takes a lot of restraint, especially at a startup. We're all really passionate about our products. We're really excited what we've built. We just want to blow them away with how cool our product is. You have to restrain that feeling. You have to make sure you are selling first and foremost that Super Mario firepower and not the flower. You have to sell where you can get them. And then it's okay to show a little bit of the product. Let's see, did I leave anything else here? Value greater than features. Oh, controlling the clock. So I like to tell my reps that you should try to have the demo wrapped up 10 minutes before the end of the hour. You can leave 5 minutes for questions, but you should leave 5 minutes for clear next steps, because you never want it to be 11:59 p.m. and everyone has a noon stop, and then you're like, okay, great, what are next steps? And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I got to jump, someone's coming into our conference room, and then you hang up the call and you have no idea what you're supposed to do next. The most important thing for you as a sales rep is to figure out what you're doing next. So control the clock. Even if this means you have to table questions for offline, you can always do that. That's okay. If someone's asking you a ton of questions, be like, you know what, Marty, it sounds like you really know this space well. I'd really love to spend some time digging in your questions. Why don't you and I set up a 30-minute session with my sales engineer or whatever, tomorrow or next week or whenever, and so we can just walk through the rest of the product. And no one minds when you do that. And probably the rest of the people in the room will be like, thank you. That guy won't shut up. So it's okay. You are the referee of this demo. You are the referee of this hour. And most people in the room want to hear what you can do. Some people just like to listen to themselves talk, and you have to control that. I think a big lesson for me at Mixpanel, when I started, I became a product expert, as you often have to do as the first sales rep. And I sort of was proud of the fact that I knew the product so well, and I sort of was like a little maybe arrogant about it. Like when someone asked me a technical question, I was like, let me show off how much I know about this product. And I would suddenly jump into a 5-minute answer that frankly no one on the call really wanted to hear. And it took a lot of sort of iteration and practice for me to realize that sometimes it's okay if the answer is just yes or no. Is that exportable? Yes. I don't need to say every format it's exportable in. I don't need to show you how to export it. I can just say yes. And that's okay. And people are usually happy with that answer. So again, it's all about restraint in the demo. Don't show off how much you know. Don't show every feature. If someone asks you if you can do something, you don't need to show all 18 ways to do it. You can just say yes. And if you can't do something, it's also okay to just say no. You don't have to say, oh, well, it's on our roadmap, and we can set up a call and talk about it. And you can say, I like to ask why behind the why. What are you really trying to achieve? Is that exportable? Well, no, it's not, but can I ask you why would you like to export it? Oh, well, I don't know. I was just curious. Okay, cool. Moving on, right? So it's okay if you can't do everything. You don't need to stumble for 5 minutes figuring out if it's okay that you don't do that. Now, if it does seem to be a big deal, if they keep coming back to is it exportable, okay, we have to dig in that further. That's clearly a big obstacle that you and I need to overcome together. But often, people are just asking out of curiosity, and just don't let that derail you. So control, control, control. You're the referee here. You're controlling the pace of the demo. The last step is closing. How do you close a demo? Depends on your product and your sales cycle. I personally hate trials. I'm really against trials. A lot of companies do free trials, so often the close after a demo is, would you like to get on a free trial? I personally think if you have a great product, there's no need for a trial. You can say, look, we have all these customers. I've shown you a demo. What do you still need to feel convinced to buy? I think trials you lose a lot of control. You deal with a lot of people trying, you end up with your champions sort of herding cats and get everybody on board to buy something. That said, if you guys have trials, that's fine. Personally, I like for the clear next step at the end of a demo to be, who do I talk to about pricing? Is there someone from your IT organization that needs to be engaged? Can we set up a call tomorrow to review pricing and get that clear next up? I'm a big fan of selling to IT. How many people in here are selling to like large enterprises? A few of you. Okay, so you guys are navigating IT. IT is a blessing and a curse, and we're going to jump a little bit more into this, but they can also help get a deal done for you if they're on your side. So I'm actually a big proponent of asking for an introduction to IT really early on. I think it actually increases the odds of the deal closing. If you're selling to startups or mid-market companies, you might not have IT engaged early on, and that's okay. Find your one person who can control pricing and get them on the phone and talk pricing. And the last thing, my favorite tip at the end of the call, is whoever set up the call, whoever your champion is, say, hey, Joe, do you have 5 minutes? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure. Can you just stay on the call for 5 minutes after everybody leaves? And everybody leaves, and you say, what did you think? How did we do? And he'll usually, well, I got to sync up with everyone, but I think that went well. I think we can get this deal done. Great. Any advice for me? Anyone you think I need to follow up with? Anything you think that we forgot to mention? And make him your co-conspirator. And I keep using that word because you really want someone in the company to be your partner in getting this deal done. You want them to help drive it through with you. So make them feel like you guys are in it together. And that usually works when you ask someone for 5 minutes of the time. If not, they may say, oh, I'm running to lunch. No big deal. Can I give you a call later today or tomorrow morning? Yeah, I'll try me at this time. Great. Cool. The final step is the timeline. What I like to do here is essentially at the end of the demo, okay, great, we're moving on to pricing. It sounds like you guys really want to move quickly on this product. It's June, mid-June now. Why don't you say we work through pricing, introducing the IT team? Why don't we aim to start contracting in July with a rollout in August? How does that sound to you guys? And get them to buy into it. And then what I like to do is send an email that confirms that timeline. People never ever respond to this email, by the way. You're like, hey, can you confirm this is the timeline I have written down? So one tip I've heard is you can say in the subject line, I think I got this wrong. And then in the email say, did I write this down right? Does this seem right to you? And then usually people respond, yeah, that seems right to me. And what you want them to do is acknowledge your timeline, because urgency is really hard to create, and it's really hard to get people to commit to timelines. I think a lot of deals die because they just sort of flounder. They're no one's priority. People keep saying, oh, don't call me back in a week, or I don't know. It's just not a top priority right now. So it's on you as a salesperson to control the urgency. And a big part of that is getting commitment to timelines and hammering that timeline. All right, that was a lot of text. Sorry about that. A lot of tips on the demo. Okay, this is a personal passion of mine, is deal structuring. I think this is really fun. There's sort of like a marketing element to this. So someone says, okay, send me a proposal. I want an option for 50 users, 100 users, and 1,000 users. And you're like, oh my God, how do I put this together? What am I incentivizing? There's a lot of different ways that you can structure deals. There's a lot of different ways you can structure pricing. And what's really fun about a startup is usually it's kind of up to you to figure it out as you go. So what I really like to do, I hate itemizing. I like keeping things really simple. I'm a huge advocate of just keep your pricing super simple. One option, maybe 2 options max. Sometimes I'm okay with 3, but very simple. You never want your pricing plan to be like, okay, for $50,000 you get 16 users, 4 data centers, 12 hours of support. You just wanted to say, our starter package is 50 grand, our enterprise package is 100 grand. And just leave it really straightforward and streamlined. And if they want to break it down later, that's fine. But on the first conversation, you want it to be very simple. My other big piece of advice is never, ever, ever give pricing over email, ever. If they won't get on the phone with you, they're not going to buy. Walk them through pricing over the phone or in person, and watch their reactions. If you say $100,000 and you say, Bob, is this what you had in mind? He probably will say, honestly, this is a little bit more than I had. No problem. What did you have in mind, Bob? I was really thinking more like 60. No problem. Let me see what I can do for you. My other piece of advice on that is anchor high. It is impossible to get a price up. Once you've thrown out 30K, you're never getting more than 30K. If you throw out 100K, it's really easy to go down to 30K. You know what? I just found out, we don't have to put you on this private cloud server. I don't think that's a security requirement for you guys. That lets me knock out. It's also June. Can you get this done in June? It's really easy to justify lowering price. It is impossible to raise it. So you want to start really high. You want to give a couple of options. You want to keep them really simple. And you want to give that pricing verbally so you can hear the reaction to it. In terms of actual structures, there's a few ways to structure SaaS deals. There's a default. So you guys all have your default pricing model, whether that's per user, per data point, per file, however you're pricing. Every company has their sort of default pricing structure. And the most common way to do this is just, okay, here's our default pricing structure. My levers are, the term, the payment options, how fast you can move, et cetera. Then there's the volume discount, which I personally love. And it's just, hey, commit more up front, commit now, and I can give you a discount. And there's always like, you got to find the right medium, right? Because they might be scared to commit too much, but they want to lock in that discount. And I think the most powerful thing you can say about volume discounting is you lock in that discount. So if somebody is like, you know what, I really plan on growing a lot over the next 2 to 3 years, this is a great plan for you because, yeah, you're taking a little risk up front. You're buying more seats than you need, but you lock in that 15% discount. So as you grow over time, this can save you tens of thousands of dollars. And that's a really compelling sale. And the key there is lock in that discount rate for growth. There's also staggered pricing, which is often called waterfall pricing. I don't love this quite as much because it gets complex to manage. But what you can do is, say you're talking to an organization and they say, we're 20 now, we'll be 40 in November, and we'll be 100 in February. You can sign a contract up front that essentially pre-negotiated upsells at a discount rate they benefit from. So that's a common one to use. I personally like avoiding that one because it becomes very complicated when you start managing commission and scaling your team. That is a viable option, though, if you're trying to get creative. And the last one is ramp pricing. Essentially what this means is we want all of our users up front, but we don't want to pay you up front. And where this makes a lot of sense is when you have really complex integrations. So let's say you have like a 6-month integration. They might say, I don't want to pay you up front until we're fully integrated. Pay me $20K up front, and then the price goes up to $60K once we're integrated. So these are other options you have available. I encourage you to get creative, especially as we get into the negotiating part. Figure out what they're motivated by, and know that there are lots of different ways to structure deals. So don't get stuck in just the basics, the default, and the volume discounting. All right, my favorite part, negotiating. And actually, I could probably go for a whole hour negotiating alone, but I tried to keep it really short today. So first and foremost, negotiating starts from the very first call. So I love this quote, don't bargain yourself down before you get to the table. Again, going back to you have the power as a salesperson. You have a lot of power. The negotiation starts from the very beginning, and you need to set the tone that you have the power. So don't just give them whatever they want. So again, a lot of text here. I'm going to walk through these principles. So my absolute favorite tactic in sales is give-get. How many of you guys have heard of this? A few of you. Great. So the basic concept behind give-get is anytime your customer or your prospect asks you for something, it's an opportunity. What are some things you guys get asked for in the sales cycle? Trial extension, great. Sorry? Materials, collateral, white papers, references, introductions, and time with your sales engineer, help figuring something out. We get asked for things constantly. And you should be excited when you're asked for something, because hey, guess what? That's an opportunity to ask for something back. Oh, yeah, you want some collateral? I'm happy. Before I do that, can we just confirm, what's your timeline on the deal? Are we still aiming for a June close? Just want to make sure before I go bug my team for collateral. They're really busy right now. Or let's say you're asked for a security review. Someone sends you one of those really ugly, hideous 12-page security questionnaires. You're like, great, and I got to go bug one of my engineers to fill this out, or I got to figure out how to fill this out. But guess what? That's a great opportunity to turn around to the customer who sent it to you and said, in order to fill that out, we have a process internally where I need to know your budget, your timeline, and who's signing off. And people are usually like, oh, okay. We just did that recently with a company that just emailed us in a security questionnaire and nothing else. So we called, there was an IT contact. We called them and said, okay, before we can process this, we need to fill out a questionnaire on our end, and just got a ton of information from him. And the deal closed exactly when he said it would for $50K, and we did the whole thing with IT. We never even talked to a buyer, which is really unique. But every time you guys are asked for something, and the bigger the ask, the better. Like a security questionnaire is a pretty big ask. Never, ever just do a security questionnaire. Never. It's a really big ask. And usually you can get away without doing it too. I think in my first couple of years of mixed panel, I don't think I ever did a security questionnaire. If you're asked for like model clauses, or you're asked for, which we'll go through in a minute, if you're asked for a legal review or signing an NDA, that seems like a simple, harmless ask. It's actually not. NDAs can often have a lot buried in them, like non-poaching clauses and indemnification clauses. So before you just sign anything, before you review anything that a customer sends you, figure out what you want from them. Figure out how to turn that into an advantageous opportunity for you. And I love this little Mad Men thing where Peggy says, it's not a banner brief, it's an opportunity. I don't know what banner brief is, but I assume it's a part of the sales cycle in ad sales. Cool. Other tactics. Something that is really important to do up front, especially when you're in a startup and you don't have a lot of resources. Before I mentioned, it's impossible to raise the value of a deal once you've thrown out a number. So before you give pricing, qualify their legal and security requirements. Do you need an MSA? Do you need an NDA? Do you need, do you know what your security requirements are? Because the worst thing, and I'm still bitter, I lost one of my biggest deals over this. It was like giving them pricing, and then at the 11th hour, they came back with a 40-page MSA. We had no in-house counsel, we had no resources to process it, and I couldn't do the deal. I said, I'm sorry, I can't do an MSA. I can only do it if I can charge you like 20 grand more, because that's what my CEO demanded. And they said, no way, we're not paying 20 grand more for this. Whereas if I had just priced 20 grand more in the price up front, they wouldn't have known. Everything would have been fine. So I learned my lesson the hard way on that one, is figure out what the requirements are, go talk to your team, your CEO, whatever, and they're not, it's rarely totally unmanageable if they have high requirements, if they need an MSA, if they need a lot of security requirements. You just need to price that in. Everyone has a price. So just figure out, yes, you're dealing with American Express, for example, really tough company to sell to. They're going to put you through hell for a year, but they also have a lot of budget. So you just need to qualify that up front. Figure out, okay, what does this process look like? What's everything you're going to need? Let me talk to my team and figure out, okay, this is what we're going to need to do for American Express. And your CEO might say, okay, cool, well, we have to charge them $500,000. Well, guess what? They can afford that. It was impossible as telling American Express it cost 50 grand and then going back and saying, actually, it's 500 grand. That's impossible. So qualify this up front so you can price it in. Anchor high, we talked about. That's setting a price really high because it's really easy to go down. It's really hard to go up. Scarcity. That's a really powerful tactic. It depends on the product that you're selling. Has anyone seen the movie Boiler Room? So I love the scene where you've got Vin Diesel, and he's on the line scamming the doctor. And he calls up the doctor, and he's like, you got to buy this stock. It's blowing up. And the doctor's like, I don't know. I got to check with my wife. I don't know. And then he does this thing where he's like, hold on. And he signals, and everyone on the floor starts yelling and cheering. And he's like, God, there's so much going on here. I've got my phone's ringing off the hook. Everyone wants to buy. I don't really even have time to talk to you. And the doctor's like, oh, God, okay. I'll buy. How much, what should I buy? And then he's like, 20,000 shares. And the doctor's like, that's insane. I would never buy 20,000 shares. And he's like, frankly, that's, I think you should buy way more than that, but I want to build our relationship first before I sell you more than that. And of course, the doctor buys the 20,000 shares. Great scene, great movie. I'm not telling you guys to go scam your customers, by the way. But I love the way he uses the scarcity tactic. He's like, this is just flying off the floors. Like, I don't even have time to talk to you. I'm so busy. I'm inundated. If you can create this feeling of scarcity, that your product is in high demand, that helps a lot. And ways you can do it in SaaS, if you guys have CSM or you have a sales engineer, you can do things like, my sales engineer schedule is getting really blocked up. I've got time for you slotted in for mid-July. We need to have your contract signed by the end of June to secure that. Or, if you have a complex integration process, I've got you in the queue for integration. Or anything you can use to kind of create this feeling like, I'm really busy, everyone wants to buy my product, I don't have enough time for you. That's a really great way to control the timeline and create some urgency. Control, so I've talked about this a lot, and this is just the concept of controlling the entire sales process. Control who's on the demo and control the clock, control the pricing and the negotiation, control who's in the room. And just know that you, at the end of the day, hold a lot of power, and don't feel afraid. Don't feel like you have to give in. Don't feel like this buyer is bullying me around because I'm in a startup. You have something they want, and that is really valuable. We talked a little bit about levers. I often like to just be upfront on my levers. Like if I'm negotiating with somebody and they say, what can you do for me? What are your discounts? I say, well, look, here are my levers. Timing, can you move forward in June?
My company's really incentivized to bring in deals Q2. Can you move forward in 20 days? Yes or no? And they'll be like, I don't know. Let me see if okay. Can you do multi-year? Can you do a 2-year deal? Can you pay up front? Can you pay up front for 2 years? And I'm really open. Here are my levers. I'm just laying them on the table. And depending on what you can and can't do, I'll go back and I always say, I'll go to my packaging team or my pricing team, right? You never want to make you personally the person who controls the discount, because then once they know that you have the power to do that, they'll get a little bit more aggressive. But if you're like, look, I need to go to my packaging team, here are my levers, tell me what you can and can't do, and I'll go talk to them. And then you come back and say, great news, my packaging team says as long as you can do a 2-year deal in June, we can give you a 15% discount. And then that makes it feel like there's a real process and structure there, and they're not just like bullying you into giving a discount, which I think big companies often feel like they can do to startups. Even though you have the control, don't let them know it. And publicity is another one. That to me is a little bit fluffy, so that one's more if I need an excuse to give them a discount. Like if I know I really want to get this deal done and I actually have plenty of wiggle room, but I want to make it look like they had to work for it, I'll say, hey, can we use your logo on our site, or can we do a case study with you? And that one's a little bit softer, though if you're working with like a Facebook or something, that might actually be worth it for you. But that's an easy way to justify a discount. And you always want to justify a discount. You don't want to just like throw out a discount because they asked. Hey, what can you do for me on pricing? I can give you 10% off, right? That's not a great framework to negotiate with. It has to feel like it's, they're giving you something and you're giving them something in return. All right, we talked about negotiating starts in the very first call and continues post-close. And the last thing I want to mention is the value of silence. This is something I make my team practice, and I think it drives them nuts, but actually being on the phone and asking something, and then you stop talking. Is this within your budget? And just stop talking. And it feels really difficult. You feel like you have to rush in and fill the silence. But if you just say, hey, here's a package for $100,000, is this what you had in mind? And then just stop talking. And just listen to what they say, because they'll probably say a lot. Oh, I don't know. I was really thinking more like 50. Now I've got to go see if I can get budget from product. I got to ask George, and you can write all this. Okay, great, George from product has $50K to contribute to this, right? And you can get a lot of details and a lot of data just by listening. So remember the power of silence. And even if you have to like write down everything you're going to say when you present pricing, that's fine. And then just shut up. And it's really hard to do. So it's something I recommend practicing is the power of silence, especially when you're asking for something. Cool. I think those are all my high-level tips on negotiating. I know I've been flying through a lot. I think we only have a couple more slides, and I'm going to open it up for questions. But any questions? Anyone? Any burning questions? Anything on negotiating? I'll definitely leave time at the end for questions, I promise. Okay, procurement. So I talked about this a little bit in the beginning. IT can be a blessing and a curse. The amazing thing about IT is they have the power to get really big deals done. So if you're talking to an individual contributor and you say something like 100 grand, they might freak out. If you talk to an IT person, you say 100 grand, that's a drop in the bucket for them at a large organization. So they have access to a lot of budget. They can centralize things. They can set you up in a way that an account can be a cash cow for you, where every time that they want more users, more licenses, more data, whatever, you can just go to IT and say, hey, we have a request for another 20K, and IT will say, great, let me process that for you. IT, however, has a job. They have a function, and that is to mitigate risk for their organization, to make sure everything's running efficiently, and to make sure they're getting the best possible deal. So they can be kind of a pain in the butt. So that's why I say a blessing and a curse. They can make the deal a lot bigger for you, but they can also make it a lot harder for you. So typically when you go through procurement, the process looks something like this. You get on the phone with the procurement person. They want to learn about your product at a high level. They want to figure, and the reason they're asking you a lot about your product is because they go do something called sourcing, which means they go out and figure out what other products you compete with, and everything that you do, they go to those companies, they try to get quotes. So if you've ever gotten like an RFP or a request for a quote, you're probably too far in that deal already. That's usually just a procurement person doing their research. I don't think I've ever just won a blind RFP, and I actually really don't like responding to them. That's usually a procurement person just doing some diligence. Figure out, okay, is their price point in line with the market? And then they'll come back to you and they'll negotiate with you. If it's not, they might ask for a discount. The cool thing is IT people are incentivized similar to salespeople. They've got quotas, and that quota might be never buy something without a 20% discount. Your quota is to get 20% off in all of our vendor relationships.
They might be incentivized on something like predictability. Make sure that none of our contracts increase by 10% year to year. So if you can ask somebody, you can ask someone in IT, what matters to you? What are you incentivized by? I recently was doing a deal with a company and basically asked the IT guy point blank, like, okay, we have a lot of different levers. What matters to you? And he's like, what really matters to me is that this price stays consistent for the next 3 years. And I said, well, why don't we do a 3-year deal, but the price is going to be higher? And he goes, that's okay. So I actually was able to raise the price, which is really hard to do usually, in return for predictability. And frankly, I rarely work somewhere where you actually call someone and say, hey, the price of your contract just went up 10%. It's really hard to do that unless you're selling them something more like features or licenses. So in exchange, we got more money for a deal than we anticipated, and we locked them in for 3 years. And the IT person was really happy with it, so everybody won. So when you're dealing with IT, understand that they are motivated similar to you and that they want to get the best deal possible for their company. But they also care about the relationship. Like if you are going to become a vendor, it's important to them to have a good relationship with you, and it makes them more valuable. So they can become a really great ally for you, and you should look at them that way. Don't discount them. Get to know them. Understand what motivates them. Set up weekly calls with them. Like I've talked about American Express before. They're one of the hardest companies to work with. I had a weekly call with their IT team for a year. Eventually got the deal done, and now I'm buddies with their IT people, and they were really nice ultimately. Just they're doing their job. They're checking their boxes. They're doing their diligence. Terms to know, I think I've referenced a lot of these, NDA, non-disclosure agreement, or MNDA, mutual non-disclosure agreement. Try to get companies to sign yours instead of signing theirs. There's a lot of clauses they can slip in there. They're not super enforceable, but you want to be careful there. Great opportunity for give-get. MSA, or master services agreement. When you're working with large enterprises, they might just say, hey, I'm just sending over my MSA, and you get this like 50-page monstrosity. Good thing to qualify up front. Avoid it if you can, especially if you're in a really small startup without any counsel. SLA, or service level agreement, this is usually an uptime agreement, like 99.9% uptime. There are sort of two flavors of SLAs you can do with credits or without. So with credits essentially means like, hey, if we don't hit our 99.9% uptime, we'll actually refund you money. Try to avoid that. And usually organizations will be okay with just saying you're in breach of contract. EU, so there's something called the EU data protection. This has actually changed a lot in the last few years, but essentially you can sign something called model clauses, which if you're working with any European companies, basically says you'll follow any of their requirements for processing international data. And then SOC 2 compliance is something that you're probably frequently asked for if you store any sort of data. Just good things, just good terms to understand and be prepared for, because you'll get asked about these things a lot in a sales process. So you just don't want to sound like an idiot. You want to sound like you know what you're talking about. Good terms to know. All right, I think I've got like two more slides. Forecasting. Forecasting is really, really hard, especially early on when you don't have a clear process. You probably don't really know what an average sales cycle looks like. The best advice I can give around forecasting is have really clear timelines established, as we talked about before. So you can actually say, yes, CEO, this deal is closing in June. We've confirmed it. They're incentivized for it. I've reiterated it 100 times. The other thing you can do that's a bit more scalable is create a sales process with what I call exit criteria, or exit milestones. So for example, if your sales process is demo or let's say qualified, discovery, demo, negotiating, purchasing, close. For each one of those stages, you should have very clear checkboxes so that you know it's not just sitting there languishing, or you've actually established activities that move them from stage to stage. This is like a whole nother deep concept of building out a sales process that's rather complex. But it does help. It really does help with forecasting, which is so challenging when you're working especially with enterprises and it's early and you're like, I really have no idea what I'm going to bring in this year. This can help you have a little bit more definition as you scale. Sales stack. This is something I get asked a lot, so I thought it just might be helpful to try to put, and I probably forgot some too, but I tried to put all the tools that I've used in one place. And I can tell you my favorites. I hate to endorse companies if any of you guys are competing with these companies, but there's a million tools out there on prospecting. Recently I tried this tool, Lucia, I really liked, which gives you phone numbers. There's a lot of them out there. I think they're really, really helpful. Lead enrichment, so this essentially, for any of you that have heavily inbound organizations, if you want to add data to those lead records so it's easier for you to figure out how to prioritize your time. There's some really good ones in here like Infers, lead scoring. Datanyze is really cool if you want to understand like what other third-party plugins they use on their site or which tools they actually have embedded in their code, like if they have any tagging like Google Analytics. LinkedIn, you guys all know, they have some really great APIs that you can plug into Salesforce. Dialing, I mentioned Outreach before. Outreach is both a dialing and a campaign tool. I'm a really big fan of it. I've heard really great things about TalkDust. I've used Central. Campaigns, I've used pretty much all of these tools. They're all really good. There's some pros and cons with each. Right now I'm using Outreach. Web conferencing, I'm a huge fan of Zoom. They're awesome, just really high quality. And then on contracts, you guys probably, these are pretty straightforward tools, but e-signature helps a lot. It really streamlines the process. It's never too early to invest in like a DocuSign-like product because it can really, really streamline the closing process if it's like June 30th and you're trying to get a deal in. CRM, I frankly am just a huge fan of Salesforce. It just scales so nicely. The reporting is really great. That said, I haven't really tried that many of these tools, so I know a lot of people try other tools. I'm not going to knock them. I will just personally say that Salesforce is my favorite. Hopefully I didn't offend anybody in the room. All right, last slide. So you've won the deal. You're popping the champagne. What I want to remind people, I think it's really easy at this point. You're like, you've finally gotten that contract in. There's a lot you can do at the end of a deal to set yourself up for long-term success. So believe it or not, people are actually most excited about a product right when they sign the contract. That's when like goodwill is highest. They're most excited, and they are most likely to grant you favors. So that's a great time to be like, Courtney, I'm so happy we finally got this deal done. You've been an amazing partner. I can't wait to roll this out. By the way, you mentioned that engineering would also be interested in this product. Would you mind making an introduction? So it feels weird asking for something right when you've gotten a signature, but it's actually a really great time to do so because that person's like, yeah, let's get everyone on board. I'm so excited. So take advantage of that excitement. It's also a great time to set up a clear process like, hey, should we set up quarterly check-ins to manage your seat capacity or figure out how much data consumption you're using? What's a great process? And get that ironed out up front. I'm also a big fan of the old school handwritten thank you note or sending like a t-shirt or sending a bottle of champagne or a bottle of wine. If you use any customer references throughout, remember to send them a bottle of wine. I know this is a little old school, but it really goes a long way when you have that personal touch. So just remember the deal doesn't end with a signature, right? Ideally, you have that customer as a customer for a really long time and you grow that account. And there are really great ways to set up the stage for that on the close. All right, so that is the summary. Here's my email. If any of you guys have questions, I'm always happy to riff and help you think through things. And now we've got 10 minutes left, so I would love to hear from you guys on things you're thinking through right now. Yeah?
So our process includes both self-serve as well as slightly larger.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know who to engage through this like sales process.
Awesome, yeah.
And who prefers just to go through it themselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes we like miss it. It's like, oh shit, we should have talked to them and got them on the call. So how do you like figure that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something, so at Mixpanel, when I joined as first salesperson, we got something like, 10,000 signups a month, and they were all just getting an automated email from my email address that said, hey, I saw you signed up, do you have any questions? So I'd come in every morning and have like 400 emails. And so that was something I really had to figure out was like, how do I figure out who to spend my time on instead of just being reactive? Because if you're just reactive, you're probably not actually hitting the highest value signups. So that's when before I was talking about lead enrichment, that's really worthwhile. So we invested in Infer, which is an investment, but it's a lead scoring tool, or a tool like Datanyze, which can show you information about that lead. And what I would try to do is instead of being reactive with the emails, I would look at we basically scored our leads into A, B, C, and D, and we essentially end up creating SLAs around each lead. So anytime we had an A lead, we were required to call them immediately. This was as we scaled. But even when it was just me, I was really trying hard to, instead of just, like not looking at my email first thing, looking at who the signups were. So who are all my A leads, especially ones with phone numbers, because often the most valuable customers will leave phone numbers. It's funny, like someone at a startup who's an individual contributor who never wants to pay for anything won't give you a phone number.
So we should ask for a phone number from everyone, just off the object, like as an optional thing.
Are you on the product side or the sales side? Okay, I mean, hey, if you're on the product side and you're okay with that, then great. I think what I have found is product always is very guarded around the sign-up form and around conversion rates on the sign-up form. As a salesperson, I'm like, yes, absolutely, always ask for a phone number, require it. I think that's sort of, as a product person, up to you. I think a great compromise is to make it optional, because I think the highest value people tend to input it and the lower value people don't. I've been in companies where they require it and companies where they don't. I personally obviously love it when they require it, but when they require it and somebody really doesn't want to give it to you, you just get a made-up number anyway. So that to me is a good compromise, is leaving it optional. And a lot of people fill it in. I want to say something like 65 to 70% of people still fill it in when it's optional. Does that answer your question around self-serve?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to find you afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, how do you go about kind of navigating the preferred vendor conversation, trying to find out kind of where you stack up, where you start the conversation, and obviously I think there's something to be said around if you don't know if there's a preferred vendor, you likely aren't. Ask, but.
Yeah, I mean, my advice is ask. People will tell you. Like if you, that's a good thing I probably should have mentioned, but you need to know who the competition is. So that's something you can ask in the discovery process. Are you guys looking at other tools? Are you just reacting? Is this just opportunistic, or are you guys doing a full evaluation process? Who else are you evaluating? What are their price points? If you don't ask, you definitely won't know. I've had very few times where they literally won't tell me. They're like, no, we won't tell you. Most people will tell you if you just ask. And then I would just ask point blank at the end of the demo, what did you think? Do you think we can solve your problems? Are there any other tools that you think are a better fit? Are we the best fit for you? And get them to say that out loud.
Yeah, I have a question more about kind of the enterprise whale client you were talking about.
Yeah.
So I did the same thing with American Express, like 12 months,
Really?
like in New York, in London, going up the chain, and like worked that whole process. And then I got to the end, they're like, yeah, we're pumped, we're ready. And then they're like, now we have to start a formalized RFP process. So it was like I brought all my competitors to the work up to the start. And I've never found a good way or anybody that has a good answer about how to avoid that, because sometimes when you engage these like large enterprise level, you start at the bottom and ask those questions like, who has this, who has this? They might not be clear about what the internal processes are if it is like your American Express or a Visa or a Bank of America.
Yeah.
Have you found a good way with your teams how to avoid that? Like all the hard work and then you bring your competition basically to the table through your efforts. I just see it happen over and over again.
So at Mixpanel, we actually created a mock template RFP so that we controlled it. So we put all of our features on one side and we wrote Mixpanel, and then we picked our competitors that we were least excited, or least open to, the most open to competing with, right? Like the ones we knew we stacked up well against, and put them side by side, and we essentially filled it out. And we said, oh, we have this template you can use. And sometimes that works. Sometimes they're like, oh, this is good enough. I can check the box that I did my homework, without actually going through a whole RFP process. And worst case, even if they go through the RFP process, they're probably going to use your template to some extent. So it's annoying and kind of time consuming to create that, but it's worth it. And that you might be able to save yourself the external RFP. Yep.
At what stage in a startup or a growth company does a sales channel say that they need to start working with internal GRC more closely as opposed to ad hoc?
Internal GRC, sorry, what does that stand for?
Governance risk compliance, so your SOC, your NDAs, like when is it like, hey, you know what, we need a pipeline at this point?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a hard and fast rule for how far along you should be. I'm going to say that probably when you're at the point when you're up to about 5 salespeople, you probably need it, because your first few sales hires will probably be a little bit scrappier and willing to work with outside counsel and fill out their own security questionnaires and like go talk to engineering and learn it. Eventually, that's not going to scale. So if I had to throw out a number, I'd say 5 AEs or so, but it also depends on your deal size. Like if you're doing $1 million deals or multi-$100,000 deals, it's probably worth investing in that earlier. Any other questions? Yep.
For the time when you are working with a company and you just like do not kind of have to go through all like the contracts and legal review, do you have like a nice way to be like, sorry, we're not going to accept any changes? And sometimes just saying it up front helps.
Yeah.
But sometimes you also don't think it's coming, and then at the very end you're like, oh, shit, this is going to kill the deal. Like, not enough time.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, you can do that. It's exactly, you said, you have to be very upfront of it. Look, we are a small company with limited resources. We don't have the resources to go through a security and legal process with you, especially at this deal size. And I'm assuming if you're talking like a deal size below 50K or so, you can usually get away with that.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, they might forget later on and bring in someone. You're like, look, we had this conversation early on at this deal size. We can't bring in legal resources and security resources. And usually they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, we get it. I've done that many, many, many times. Here's our online terms. If you want to make 1 or 2 edits to that, we probably can. But we can't go through a full MSA process. We just don't have the resources to do it.
And you say that during the pricing call?
Yes, very upfront with it. Look, here's the price. I want to be totally transparent with you. At this price point, we can't entertain an MSA. We're limited on how much we can run line our terms of service. Here they are. Here we can provide you with a security fact sheet. We can't go through a full security review. Please let me know if this is adequate for your team.
Okay.
And a better way to do it is to ask up front if they need them before you give them pricing.
Yeah.
Just like up front, are you going to need this stuff? Because we do, that will determine the pricing package we could put together for you. But yeah, you can get away with without doing that on a lot of deals. You'd be surprised, even at large companies, you can get away with a lot as long as your price point is below 6 figures. Yeah.
I'm curious how you have your teams broken down. Are you doing, between phone and video? Like, at which stage of the cycle they're engaging? Like, just over the phone, maybe that initial kind of discovery call?
Yeah.
And do you switch over to video?
Yeah, so our BDRs are all phone and email, and then our AEs are primarily Zoom conference calls or in person. Anything else? Cool, I think we're right at time. I will hang out here if anyone has any questions. Feel free to email me, and thanks so much for coming.